When watching a duck from water to wing, whose feathers catch rays iridescent, what can I be except present? When hearing its rhythm splashes and quacks, no stranger sounds than required, what can I be but inspired?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Solacene. This is the 7th episode in our internet semester, and this week we're going to be talking about TikTok, internet art, and Solacene memes. I really liked that poem, Aaron. You read it to me last night or this morning, and I just loved it.
Precisely about an hour and a half ago, so I'm a little bit worried that you think it was yesterday. But yeah, I wrote it while I was looking at a picture of a duck and thinking about ducks. So maybe not the most Solacene way of writing it, but that's the way it goes. I was just trying to get across some image of mindfulness, being high on life is something I've had people, I had someone say that this week, and I thought kind of like, I think I would describe, like people would describe me maybe as high on life, but I don't like how it's always kind of contextualized in drug terms. You know what I mean? It's like, just say happy. Like fundamentally like happy, joyous, content even. So much content, but I actually am somewhat content.
Yes. For anyone watching on YouTube, you may notice Aaron now has blonde hair. I just wanted to put that out there as a Easter egg. If you choose to watch, you get these fun updates about our appearances.
Yeah, it's my eat, pray, love moment.
Yeah.
Also, just going back to the poem, when I said like, for the duck, no stranger sounds than required, because the thing is ducks make weird sounds, like that's something, but there is a certain, I mean, it's funny because there is like, I suppose, a kind of like incongruous element when you're at a really peaceful lake and you just hear the most throaty quack ever, and you're like, what is that? Or like, they're never really graceful when they're kind of splashing in and out of the water, which was the moment I was writing about. But even so, I think there is a harmony to it where it's like, they're from that ecosystem, they're from that landscape, and so they fit in visually and also like the audio. Like even sounds in nature that are overbearing, you think about like a rooster or a duck or something, it fits, it makes sense. And I think that word harmony is maybe relevant for today's episode, 1/3 of which at least is the takedown of TikTok. That's kind of what we're talking about today, in parts. And so on the subject of sounds of nature and also of an app, which at least at one point used to be primarily musical, I was reminded also of like the Bo Burnham skit song from the Inside special that was on Netflix, where he basically concluded like, sometimes people just should be quiet. And I know that sounds a little bit ironic because we have a podcast, but you know what I'm talking about? It's like sometimes we should all just be quiet and let the ducks do the screeching.
It's true. Yeah, I agree with that. I forgot about the Bo Burnham special. I feel like that's an interesting thing we should talk about maybe, given that it's the internet semester and it was a very internet heavy special.
But do you remember that part though where he was just like, why can't everybody just shut up? His words, not mine.
His words. Yeah, it's a good point. I had a picnic a couple days ago, and we were reading poems, and I read one, and they were like, well, why do you like that over the other ones? Because we each like picked a poem out of the book. And I said, because I feel like I like when poets compare humans to nature. Because if you compare a human to something man-made, it's kind of less reverent towards the person, like if it's supposed to be a love poem. But if you're comparing them to nature, then like you're comparing them to something as close to perfect as possible. They're like, well, don't you think some things in nature aren't perfect? And we were discussing like ugly flowers or birds that smell like poop and stuff. And it's like, but at the end of the day, even if it's a bird that smells like poop or a flower that's like objectively quite ugly based on our standards, it's still just wild that it exists and has evolved to be like attract pollinators or evolve to stop predators from coming close. And I just feel like your poem and nature in general is such a juxtaposition to the internet and content on there, which I feel like we treat as if it's perfect and almost natural, but it's like, it's not natural.
Yeah.
It's like we don't need to capture these moments.
There is something to the publication of things on the internet that makes it feel like it's a living thing, or that kind of validates its existence to a weird extent. I'm thinking even about, like, let's say when we record this podcast, or let's say when we started, It's like we record an episode, which is just to our hard drive as an MP3 or whatever. But then when we were published on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it's like, look at this. We made it. It's breathing now. There's something about that that's quite... I don't think that's really that bad, but I do think that's something to note.
Yeah, like I don't think about it very often, but then you do kind of treat it as if it's inevitable, if it's just always existed and it just has a life of its own. Like even if we all stopped using it, it would go on. But that's not true. We are the ones who power its existence. Maybe trying to keep that in mind a bit more.
Unlike the duck just is.
Yeah.
First question of today is something about how the Solacene internet won't be devaluing art to the extent that the current internet does into that dreaded famous term of content.
Yes. So the internet is very postmodern. I feel like it's postmodern is what I was thinking, and that it's...
I would say 3 posts.
Yeah, like
actually, I don't know.
There's a lot of posts, and it's all postmodern. In that it
Post
takes... Posting.
Yeah. Ooh.
In that it often... Like, nothing's original on the internet, despite it often being packaged as original. And I was reading an Eckhart Tolle book for the first time, and I was like, why is this man presenting all of these ideas as if they're his own, when they're just genuinely ancient ideas of mindfulness and being aware? And I feel like, so what I'm saying with that is that it's not exactly new. Like, it's been happening for hundreds of years.
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, people like repackaging ideas and presenting them as their own. But on the internet, it feels 100 times quicker in that it's not just ideas, but it's literal visuals and ways we move and ways we speak. It's just you can copy and paste a TikTok format and you literally don't even have to say the words, you can just lip sync. Or you can copy and paste an article, change a couple words, and then publish it as your own.
Right.
All kind of legitimately on the internet. Like no one, it's not illegal in that if you claim to be parodying or claim to be like commenting or critiquing, you can use whatever you want.
I didn't even think about that. So you're saying a lot of the current devaluation comes from the repetition and the YouTube/TikTok videos of some guy just with a disembodied head looking at you while the original video plays in the background.
Yeah,
or
like reaction videos.
Reacting to Guns N' Roses' album from the 80s, Must See. And the thumbnail was like a bunch of kids throwing themselves off the couch or something like that. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
It's a weird genre. I've never watched one of those videos, but I always see them, and I'm like, who is watching and why are they watching? Maybe that can be a question for next week, actually. Reaction videos.
Yeah.
Reaction videos next week.
So I think that was like the first thing that came to my mind, and how art is devalued, and like you can't just consume it, it's always through someone else. Like we talk about also people playing video games, and you kind of consume the video game through these walkthroughs and stuff, or like you never see stuff just from the original poster.
I don't think it's that insightful a point, but I do think that is key to mention first. Because again, going back to the Bo Burnham special, there's the bit of the Twitch streamer, right? And there's like the Twitch stream, he's like reacting to the reaction of the reaction, you know, like that. That is a good point. And it's annoying, sometimes you want to find something from the original source. And I'm not talking about like a peer-reviewed study. I mean, that's its own challenge trying to find things. But even sometimes you just want to find, I don't know, like a song. It's like, all I can find is people talking about this song, which is something else. Yeah, curious. I was thinking about payment. It's probably like an unpopular idea, and it sounds kind of anti-consumer, but paying appropriate prices for things is a good way to value them as art. You wouldn't steal a car, so why do you steal a movie? And I'm not even talking about piracy, but streaming. When you think about streaming music versus having to buy it, that's a whole other thing in terms of how much you cherish the song. Not to get a little bit Taylor Swift, I think this is one of her soapboxes, and this is kind of a concurrent issue. I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to get into it, but when people talk about the internet and technology and, let's say, just the economics, the way things are going into, and AI being into like a post-scarcity society, and where work is optional, or work is largely undertaken by machines and such, and art can thrive. It's like, but we are not designing an economy when arts are profitable for the artists.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, that's why STEM, it's like, if you want to make money, do that, and there is almost no other option. And I understand that this has been the case for most of history, and I'll talk about this a little bit later when it comes to entertainment. But for most of history, I feel like arts was an escape from hard labor on the farm so that you could eat,
Mm-hmm.
or like so that you could survive the winter. But now it's kind of a distraction. It's an end in itself. It's just like, it's not a respite from anything. It's just, this is what we live for. So like when I was younger, and I'm sure this is the case for most people, you had to buy songs and albums. So there's like 99 cents for a song, or 10 or 11 or 12 or something for an album, depending on the length. And so I probably had about 20 songs
Mm-hmm.
on my MP3 player, which I just listened to over and over. But now, let's say on Apple Music or on Spotify, the For You playlist, like new music for you, I'll listen to each song for about like 5 seconds, maximum 10 seconds, before deciding that's not for me. So, I mean, and it's obvious also with films, like the way people used to cherish the idea of the cinema or the DVD, and used to rewatch these things and used to get to know them. We've talked about this before, I think, in the storytelling semester, but just that access to it. And I had a question, I suppose, for next week, but mostly just for you and I. Should we cancel our streaming?
We don't pay for any.
I know we don't pay. I know we moved for them all, but still.
I was thinking about that a little bit.
For the sake of our souls.
Yeah. Because I like the idea of having a DVD collection.
Me too.
And
a music collection.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. Maybe we'll discuss this off air.
Why? Everything should be discussed on air.
I feel like it's a boring conversation for people to listen to.
I think so as well.
I'd be on board. I think we could maybe figure out about renting movies or something like that.
Well, what are the merits?
You have to choose.
Right.
You can't just like watch a movie and be like, I don't like it, because you paid for it.
It's true, you have to learn to like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to, I think it kind of grows your critical eye a little bit, like your appreciating eye, so that even if something isn't great, you watch it because you find a certain merit in looking at that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it would get us to go to the cinema more.
I agree.
And to even just go to different sections of the thrift store and like browse through the CDs, browse through the DVDs. Because right now I always just go and look for Blu-rays, and if there's nothing on our like top tier Blu-ray list, I won't even look any further, because our DVD collection is like 6 right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's interesting.
There's also something else I wanted to talk about with regards to like valuing art. I didn't really know how to squeeze into the conversation, but I love how DVDs have behind the scenes features and kind of peripheral stuff like that, the making of.
Mm-hmm.
And streaming very rarely has this. I know there's sometimes things available on YouTube, but it just feels like it's less of a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
There was one last year that we watched accompanying the Del Toro Pinocchio on Netflix, right? I think it was like a 40-minute behind-the-scenes featurette on the animation of it. And I thought that was great, and we watched it, and it just made you appreciate the movie even more, because you could see all the love and effort that went into it.
Yeah.
And similarly, when we first moved into Montreal and we didn't have Wi-Fi for like a week or so, I watched the Wizard of Oz with the commentary track, which I would have never done otherwise, but it was because it was one of the few DVDs we had, I did so. And I was just learning a lot about like the old woman who played the witch.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, I don't know, I like that kind of thing.
I like this idea. We recently bought a radio.
Right, the radio.
Inspired by Solacene, of course.
Yeah.
And I've played it a few times, I'm looking at it right now. It's Fisher Price, of course, because I wanted one that was like, it looked cool, because a lot of radios you buy, they're they're very like early 2000s, and I don't love how they look, but this one just looks like a toy.
Like
it's
a
kind of awesome. And I like this because all the radio channels are in French. We live in a French-speaking city, so it's kind of forcing me to be like, I live in Montreal, because otherwise your media consumption is completely just...
Yeah, exactly. Well, how it grounds you, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise the music that you listen to, how did it change when you moved from Nova Scotia to Montreal, which in essence is moving like across 3 different countries.
Yeah.
It didn't at all.
Change, yeah.
Which it should.
Mm-hmm.
Everything should.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. And then also if we switch to DVDs or CDs, it's like you're kind of limited by what you can buy in the stores.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I know you can always buy things online, but
Right.
it's less economical, I find, to buy things firsthand.
Well, we watched that very strange. I think the only DVD that we've gotten from the library. We watched that very strange. I think it was Belgian film.
Yeah.
It was in French. This isn't interesting for the viewers, or for the listeners, so I'll ignore that. But I'm just saying it kind of puts you at the mercy of the world around you, which is at least in part a Solacene trait.
Yeah, another Solacene idea I had for this question was, at the moment when you consume media online, it's really similar to what you were saying.
Consume.
There's no trace of the artist. But when you even go to a museum, you see the artist's signature and a little write-up that they've put to accompany it. You have the extra features on a DVD. Perhaps you are going into a clothing store and they have a workshop set up. Like, there's a few of those around town that I love. Like, there's usually just the woman who's behind the counter is working on a piece that she's then going to sell in the store. But if you buy online, there's no trace of the people, so you're just consuming the products. You're not appreciating the fact that human time and effort went into this.
Yeah.
And this is, I feel like, especially true with music and with visual art, in that often I feel like traditionally the way you would find out about an artist is either on the radio, but also going to concerts, being like, there's nothing happening, I'll just go to this concert, I don't know who it is. And you see the person, you hear them talking about their music, and you see their band. But when you consume online, you don't think about the band existing, you don't think about even the person, you're just like, yeah, this is fine.
Well, it's fine because your standards are warped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, we've talked about the devaluation of art in one way, but there's also the way in the straight up, now if your classmate plays the guitar and sings, you're probably not as impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before time, it was like, this person is a wizard, and everyone's going to worship at their feet because they can sing, or because they can draw, or because they can paint, or because they can hold a camera steady.
Because they're funny.
Because they're funny, yeah. I know you're trying to posit yourself as the stand-up comedian
No, I'm
now.
not. Oh my goodness.
No, but it's true though, right? So, or even like the guy on the street singing. I think that, like, we're so kind of desensitized to creative talent now, and I just don't think that's that good, because I feel like it makes people never impressed or rarely impressed.
Yeah, and I feel like it does two things to our own creativity at the same time. Once, it makes you feel like, oh, I can do anything because I see all these people on the internet doing everything.
Yeah.
But it also, once you get into it, you're like, well, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be Justin Bieber. I'm never going to be whoever you're
never going to be Bieber, you don't think?
I don't think I'm ever going to be Justin Bieber.
I think he's that talented. Anyway.
But you know what I mean. I'm never going to be the expert because you're constantly seeing the absolute best in the whole world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of a boring answer, but I just think proper community, again, like more socialization, hanging out, going to the bowling club, or wherever it may be, because then you're spending less time scrolling to find something to watch or to listen. Like, I was reading this article recently, and it said something like, it was making the case basically that people in 2023 just listen to too much music.
Yeah.
Like, we just have headphones in too much and we just listen to too much music, and I was finding it very hard to disagree with that. I was like, we kind of do. And part of this also, or what this also made me think about, is the concept of the internet as a place, and we view it too much as a replacement for places. It should be just used as a tool, obviously, that's what people say, but also people will say about, there's a movie online, oh, it's streaming. Where is it streaming? As if that's a place, as if Netflix, Amazon Prime, Tubi, YouTube, as if those are all different places that you can go to.
Yeah, you can say, where can I find you?
Yeah, where can I find you?
As
if you are physically making some kind of journey and navigating.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a non-place. That's why I like that term.
Yeah.
A non-place. That's how we should think of it.
But it just feels so real. Like, I don't know how to describe it besides that. Of when you're on the internet, you really feel like you are somewhere, like you are with people, like you're doing something productive. But I legit feel like 9 times out of 10, if not more, you just come away from it feeling worse. Like every single time. And it's so hard to remember that. I don't know, it's addictive. Maybe we can talk about the addiction, like internet addiction, a bit more.
Oh,
next
internet
week.
addiction.
I wrote about that for the zine, so I feel like, and I found a genuinely interesting article about it because it was hard to find anything about internet addiction, but the EU did a study and were brutally honest about how it impacts people's lives and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was really happy to have found that study because really other than that, there's nothing.
But the only thing with studies, I mean, I'm going to sound like, I don't know what I'm going to sound like now, like anti-science or something, anti-intellectual. But sometimes they're just so behind.
Yeah.
Like these things are just, they're so obvious sometimes. And I was reading this, it was like study claims that TikTok could shorten attention span. And I'm like,
it does.
This is, like, I don't need a study to tell me that TikTok is dreadful. Anyway, also buy the zine, everybody. Handmade.
Yeah, has art, has essays.
They're nice
cameos.
and tactile.
Yeah.
And beautiful.
Yeah,
and sustainable.
Okay, I have a few more things on this question about the Solacene internet. One is that I feel like the Solacene internet might just be a money-free zone, which means you can't buy things there, but also means you can't like consume things in the way. So you're saying, like, you remember how when you used to buy a CD, it would have a digital download code, things like that. Like you'd have to buy the physical to then get the digital version.
It's the opposite of NFTs.
Yeah, so that's what inspired it, was how much I hate how the internet just kind of applies arbitrary value to stuff.
Non-fungible.
Yeah, so it's like there's the NFTs, there's also like, you think about an Instagram sponsored post and it's just like, we'll pay you $600 for this, and it's like, I don't, like all the value of everything is just kind of random.
Well, you have to think in the advertising they've done the math and they think they're going to get the ROI, but I agree. Yeah,
it's not exactly an exact science. And then the music, it's like, well, we'll pay the artist 1 cent per stream, and it's like, is that actually the value of it?
I think they wish they were getting 1 cent per stream.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just completely arbitrary. Yeah, 1 cent per stream would be excellent, but it's not that. So I think in the Solacene internet, it will be a money-free zone. Perhaps you could order things, like how you can order in a catalog, but then you have to go to the place to buy it.
Maybe we can talk about catalogs next week, even though it's not like that's a very anti-internet thing. Also, I'm always wary about Solacene just sounding like a nostalgia trip, the 80s or 90s or something. We're talking about, oh, we have this cool handheld radio. Let's talk about catalogs. So let's be wary of that. But also, catalogs were kind of cool.
Yeah, I also, I don't know, this week I feel like has been one of the most, but we're not anti-capitalist. We're just slower capitalists. I don't know what you would say. But, what am I saying? Yeah, this week was one of the most, like, Solacene heavy experiences that it's almost hard to then come on and, like, talk about these things because, I don't know, since we talked about it at the beginning, since starting the semester, I was like, I feel like it's going to really change how I think about the internet. And it just increasingly by the week, I'm like, even making a podcast feels strange. But I know this is basically the new radio, and that I love radio.
Ooh, podcast is the new radio.
Yeah, and then what else was I going to say on this question? Yeah, internet obviously in the Solacene won't be the primary place that you consume art. Ideally, it will just be like, not where you consume art. I don't know how to describe it other than that. But I think it's good in that, like, we grew up in a rural place, otherwise we would have had no exposure to that's fine art for the most part, unless it was through books. But it has merits in that way. And I also think in the Solacene there'll be really strict regulation on intellectual property, and like parody laws will be a bit stricter. Because it's like you can, like when people make videos, say it's going to be like an hour-long commentary on The Dark Knight, like you're allowed to just use footage from the film if you're providing commentary.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I feel like stuff like that, a little bit, it would just be new rules. Like, it's not enforcing the regulations because these are the regulations. Like, you're allowed to provide commentary. I think something a bit more strict in that, so that you can't just, like, peripherally consume media.
It's a good point, where you see things out of context so often. Like, even that YouTube channel, like, I don't anymore, but there used to be the channel pointing out the movie mistakes. Everything wrong with, right?
Yeah. And
they just go through the film, essentially, showing clips of it. They condense it into 10 or 15 minutes, but nonetheless, you're seeing the film from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And I'm quite sure I've watched at least one of those for a film I haven't seen. So it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and it's just like, you'd think the person who made that film, whose life's work it was, like, is that really how they want the world to witness it?
Mm.
And I think parody is fine, and I think it's, like, okay to talk about it, but I just think there needs to be slightly different regulations in the Solacene.
How happy would you be if there was a Solacene parody?
I wouldn't be very happy. I was thinking about that last night, how torn apart I am at, like, every single criticism.
Well, we heard somebody yesterday, we overheard someone saying, like, oh, but have you heard of this podcast? And then they said something else, but I think for an instant, we both were just like, if they say Solacene now, my life is complete.
Yeah.
But I feel like that, like, if someone was parodying us.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like that would be cool. Like, if SNL did a bit.
Well, yeah.
Then you've made it.
It's true.
Speaking of making it, though, the meme of the week is not really internet-based. It's kind of taking the meme definition quite literally as a bite-sized chunk of information transmitted culturally as, like, the societal analog to genes, right, biologically. And it's kind of like physical memes. So the one that I was thinking about was, I don't think I've seen this since elementary and middle school, but about, like, you pretend like you're cracking an egg on someone's head with your fists, and then you kind of, like, run your hands down their hair and face. It sounds very strange just to describe it. But another one I was thinking about was high five and then turkey.
Yeah.
So you pull, like, a little fist with a thumb out and it looks like a turkey shape, or, like, fist bump
Squirrel.
and then squirrel or snail or something like that. Just these physical comedic things which they're not original. You've seen it 100 times before, but you still do it, and through the repetition or through the, I don't know, the sheer randomness of it, the surprise of it, it's kind of funny. Or at least it's funny to me, because that's purely my sense of humor.
Yeah, I have a funny story along these lines.
Okay.
So I taught a kid how to do, like, up high, down low, in the middle, too slow.
Exactly.
But then whenever I see him try and give someone a high five, he just goes, in the middle. And then, like, adults are just like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because, like, that's not how you do it. But, like, I've seen a few times, an adult will be like, high five, and he goes, in the middle.
Does he pull his hand away, though?
No.
Oh, he just says that.
And then I think he usually says, like, you have to go too slow. But, like, he doesn't get it. It's just funny. Because as you're saying, it's a meme. And it's funny how it mutates from kids and adults. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Because it doesn't have to be exactly as it's set. Like, it's...
Are there any others I'm forgetting? I like the word mutation, talking about it, like, biologically and culturally, the analog again.
Yeah, I don't know. There's lots. There's, like, those hand games that you play, like...
Yeah, but, it needs to be kind of bite-sized and I think comedic. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I was thinking about those ones.
Yeah, you go for the handshake and you go,
I got
flick
you
your
there.
hair back with it or whatever. I don't know. Because it's at the 50s and we have greasy
funny.
hair.
It's true. But I was looking, trying to find the origin of these things, specifically the egg crack.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find it. I could just find, like, videos of elementary school kids doing it. And
That's interesting, yeah. Like, where does it come from?
Exactly. Just like memes, or a lot of the memes. Like, no one, the origin of it is often murky. These are, I think, decades old, but still persisting. Whereas I wonder if the Drake meme will. I think it will, but it's a fun. Well, here's what I wrote: a fun physical intimacy that isn't just unthinking routine. So, like, I was seeing a lot this week. Bros doing the like that hug.
Yeah.
I was trying to make a sound of it for the podcast on the microphone. You know the hug I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
But it's like that is a code. It's a default. They all do it all the time.
The bro hug.
And even the secret handshake that individuals might have, you do the same thing every time, and it's not universal. Whereas with the up high, too slow, squirrel, snail, turkey thing, egg cracking. I don't know if that's exactly. I think the egg cracking is in there.
Yeah.
It's you can do it to everybody, and it's. I think also partly the juvenile nature of it adds to the comedy. Like, if you see, like, a 30-year-old man cracking the egg on a coworker with their fists, it's a bit. There's that element of surprise.
Oh.
But also, what I like is that it kind of puts people in their skin.
Yeah.
Because let's say someone goes for the little fist bump that all the bros do, and then you pull out the snail. Immediately, that's like they were doing this unthinkingly. Now they are thinkingly with their skin, thinking skin.
Yeah, stealing a kid's nose. Like, I got your nose.
Stealing the nose, yeah.
That's similar. Yeah.
Something like that.
Exactly. I'm like, stop it from my nose.
I can't breathe. I can't smell.
Yeah, I've seen so many people, kids, get upset about it, and I always feel bad. Because, I mean, it'd be scary. You think someone stole your nose.
Speaking of scary and stealing your nose, TikTok. No scent there.
No scent.
Yes.
Noses.
Why don't we like TikTok? Let's go through the list.
God. From the time TikTok was born, I just had a visceral...
When it was rebranded or when it was...
Well, musically I never got on to either. But it just felt wrong from the beginning. And I feel like a lot of people have this reaction. Because it's not just us, the two anti-internet kids. It was like a lot of people were like, it just doesn't seem right. Because of, from the absolute beginning, the stuff that was on there and went popular wasn't just like, oh, look at this aesthetic video of my life. It would be like a kid wearing like boxers and like a cowboy hat and like slapping a chicken. Like that was what was funny or whatever. It would just be something so random but also just like morally grotesque.
Actually, something you just mentioned there, talking about the origin, when you think about Facebook, the storied beginnings of Facebook originating on campus, right? So people aged, let's say 18 to 25. Musically / TikTok originating a younger demographic, right? So there is a difference between, let's say, like LinkedIn starting out as one thing and then maybe gradually, this hasn't really happened, but let's say it might, like gradually becoming a wider used thing. There's a big difference, the original intents, or something that was basically for children, or at least adolescent people, taking more people in, because there's a certain immaturity to it, which I think is basically what you're getting at there. That now we see just everybody watching and laughing at, which is slightly worrying.
Yeah, also that it so quickly became the sole channel through which people got their news, got their politics, got their recipes, like everything is through TikTok. And even...
You think? About Twitter?
I feel like the rest of them have become secondary for most people. From what I gather from my, what's it called? Not empirical, what's the word? Anecdotal experience of just like, even the other day I made cinnamon rolls for a friend and she said, oh, did you find this recipe on TikTok? I saw it on TikTok. And I was like, no, it's just from like a recipe.
Okay, before we get into the content of it, like you kind of touched on it there, I thought we could talk about the form of it, because I feel like that's what differentiates it for me immediately. So the notes I had on that, the first one is that it is utterly dimensionless, placeless, the ultimate non-place, because it has barely any UI. I mean, I know you can go to people's user pages and you can search, but I'm talking about how people use it, which is just the For You page.
Yeah, like you don't even really follow people the way that you would on
generally not. Like it's just, you are entirely, it's fully built for phones. It occupies the entire screen on the video, so it's probably the first social media that I think maximizes the phone form, because the Instagram, the images were square, or YouTube, obviously they're usually in landscape, so this is a key difference. And similarly to this, like on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, none of which I think are good, as we talked about before, there is a sense of you can stop, you can easily back out of things, whereas I feel like on TikTok, the way out that people are conditioned into navigating it is through. Like the way out is through. So I don't like this video, I'll go to the next. They don't hit the back or hit some other button. I think it's just, we'll swipe down to the next one. Or similarly, like the real way out is only to close the app. Like that's what people do. Whereas sometimes on Twitter, it's like, oh, this is boring. You go to the home page, or you go to something else, or you click on a hashtag,
profile or anything.
Your profile. Whereas on TikTok, it's like you're in or you're out. I think that's and a lot of people are in for a long time.
Yeah, it really took me a long time to understand the For You page experience, because people were like, oh, I saw it on my For You, and I was like, because social media has always had this like recommended people to follow sort of thing, but I didn't understand that it was just like, this is what the app is people you haven't chosen them to be here. The algorithm has chosen them for you. And usually it's stuff you like, and you just keep going. Whereas with Instagram, especially in the early days, I remember it would run out. Like you're saying, TikTok is infinite. But you'd follow your 100 friends or whatever. But then if no one posted that day, there'd just be no new posts. But now Instagram has taken cues from TikTok in that it will just recommend posts even on your main page. And
we're talking TikTok, but it also means
yeah,
IG Reels, YouTube Shorts. Like it's the same. All those copycats as well.
Yeah. TikTok just seems especially malicious.
Of course, it's 100% the algorithm. You make no decisions.
Yeah.
Like if you actually pitched it to someone, you'd say it's like YouTube, except you don't choose the videos you watch. You don't really search for them. It's that the right-hand side of the YouTube page, the up next, as decided by the algorithm. They play automatically. There's no loading between videos, no ads. It just next, and so it kind of feels like one long video, one long stream of it. It's very like it sounds bad even when you're describing it, and it is bad. Also, like these notes aren't in order of importance, but a small thing, I guess, I feel like it's bad for music. It generates bad music because people now, I know like pop, it's always about a hook, but this is like micro specific. We're trying to get a sound trending. Oh,
like I think I just cringed like from my soul. I remember early TikTok, Drakery came out with a new...
Drake, yeah. I feel like not everybody knows.
Yeah, that's a really
Drakery.
niche joke.
You're like, oh, who's that?
Okay, Drake. He came out with whatever song it was during the pandemic, and I remember he was like, it was so... so specific of wanting to make a dance.
Yeah.
Because TikTok, I feel like is coming away from the dances a little bit, but it was so dance-oriented. It was like you're delivering information and you're dancing, and it was just the most cringy thing. Like, you're just a 40-year-old man.
It's true, Drake is old.
And it's not right. And I feel like so many artists now, they try and get this little sound bite, but also accompanied with like a visual something.
Well, not just sound, not just art, not just music, but think about podcasts.
Yeah.
Because are we on TikTok still?
No.
Well, so we're at least briefly on TikTok.
We had TikTok.
Definitely on IG Reels.
Yeah, okay.
We might go back. Well, it's in flux right now.
Yeah.
But we recognize that it's not a very TikTok friendly thing because we speak in full sentences, or at least attempt to, and also we don't shout, and I guess we don't wear very bright colors. Maybe in the well though.
Yeah. Okay. I have a few things.
So basically, it is to music and also videos, like video stuff is something like what tweets are to literature.
Yeah.
I.e., just kind of gross infantile perversion. Sounds so serious about it.
Okay, here's a few things. I listen to the Basement Yard podcast, and once in a while you'll hear them say because they don't really edit the way that we edit, and they'll say, oh, we need to like restate that for TikTok.
Yeah. And
then they'll kind of like have a conversation, and then they'll sum it up in like a TLDR, too long don't read.
Yes.
Look at me go. Statement at the end, like, so what did you just say? And then they'll like, do it just for the soundbite. Where are they going with this? But, our Instagram. I'll talk about it here just for a quick moment out of shame. Out of shame, and also out of like asking for feedback from anyone who's listening, because you folks understand what the podcast is about, so this is my cry for help. So we were on Instagram for like a long time, and then I just kind of reached a point where I was like, this is so the opposite of what the podcast is about. But then once I stopped, because that was our sole way of promoting the podcast, it's just kind of stayed the same, like how many people are listening. So I was like, at the end of the day, it was doing the job of getting people to listen to the podcast. So that's hopefully doing good and getting the ideas we want across.
Yeah, my feedback is no one should sell their soul ever.
I know.
Because I'm a bit of a purist like that.
You think no selling the soul?
Yeah, I think no selling the soul. But going back to TikTok and the algorithm, because I was thinking someone might say, well, why is it bad? The algorithm knows what you like. Here's my most concise way of saying why it's bad. It's because usually, and in this case, the healthy decisions are the ones that are conscious and sometimes difficult. Let's talk about food. Like if food was just delivered to you, cooked in front of you. You didn't cook it, you didn't buy it, you didn't choose it, but it was based on what you like. What kind of food is going to be there? Not very healthy food, because sometimes, like, let's be honest, no one likes vegetables.
Yeah.
No one likes vegetables, but we eat them because we're grown-ups, and it's like, these are good for me. I'm not going to just have donuts all day.
Yeah.
Even though the algorithm would say, wow, they really like donuts, let's give them donuts. So it's like that, but with your soul instead of your body.
Yeah.
And your mind, especially.
That's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Good job, Aaron.
But the thing is, like, people might be rolling their eyes at this. I know it's not insightful. Like, I know it's an obvious thing. But then,
why do we do it?
Why do we do it to ourselves, man? Why do we do it? Also, about the idea of the music and the hooks and the drapery and the dances, there is the trending sounds, the blur of videos. I feel like when I used to, I mean, I didn't really have TikTok, but when YouTube shorts, I've watched those, let's say, for like half an hour at a time sometimes. Maybe not that long, but like I've been on these platforms. It plays in your mind when you're away from the screen after. Let's say, like, the most obvious example is, or the most relatable, when you're laying down for bed and you can't get your mind to calm down, because it's like, well, why would you be able to? It's the opposite of mindfulness. It's just, it lingers.
Yeah, there's so many things. It also just becomes, you can't speak properly. Like, it's almost like the sounds from TikTok are the easier, because the neural pathways are more lubricated, because those are what you've seen over and over again. It's easier to just like use a soundbite to communicate with someone than to think about it. And it's like, this is a legit thing that happens in kids who have communication issues. Like, there's like a whole spectrum of things that kids like deal with. It could just be like a speech impediment, but there's other communication things that kids have, and they'll speak in, it's called coding, in like cartoon lines, which is like, it can be very useful if a kid otherwise has no way of communicating. But I feel like to an extent, I mean, I am not a child psychologist or a psychologist, but to an extent it's like, we're kind of doing this to ourselves and like lowering our ability to, lowering our communication skills to just kind of these funny, but also just like, they're kind of useful in our brains because they're the easiest way of getting a point across, but I don't think that's especially great.
No, of course not.
Yeah, and I feel like
the other thing with regards to it being kids, there's another thing bad about TikTok. Most of the people who use it, their brains aren't finished developing.
Yeah.
It's like you throw this nuclear bomb into people's minds when they're adults and they're willing. It's like, you know, they volunteered. We don't want it to happen. I'd rather they stop, but they chose it.
Yeah.
The gross thing is that children, you can't really call them responsible for, you know, just eating all the donuts that are in front of them.
Yeah.
It's kind of the grown-ups' jobs, not talking specifically about the parents, all of the grown-ups' jobs, but also the parents, to make sure they have some vegetables. Maybe that got a little bit muddy, but...
No, that's a good point, because even in like, when nutritionists talk about feeding kids, they say you should put a plate of like cheese, vegetables, and like a cookie all in front of them at once, so that they can see it all and like still make a choice, but they also, like, if they're hungry, they will go for the carrots after they've eaten the cookie, sort of thing, and they'll kind of get used to it being there. But because the only thing we're putting in front of kids is, a plate of all cookies, it's like, even if they're hungry, like, they don't know what to go to after the TikTok. Because I feel like a lot of young people, they know that it's an empty feeling they have when they're done scrolling for
think about how many young people are on like pills or on medication. And people might say, oh, you know, the world today. It's like, yeah, and it annoys me because there's so many people who would wait for studies. Like, again, I like to sound anti-science or anti-intellectual. I'm pro-science, I just think it's slow sometimes. Like, TikTok is young.
Yeah.
It's slow, so you don't see it hasn't been proven that children who watch TikTok for 6 hours a day when they were 15 are like this when they're 25.
Yeah.
But, like, it's obvious. It's common sense when you just read it out. It's like, well, why would that not happen? Why would that not be bad for them?
Yeah, so...
Something else, attention span, like, again, that's kind of a trite comment to make, but I was thinking, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but about how movie trailers now will have a tiny TikTok trailer before them.
Yeah.
Like, talking about like a 5-second preview of the trailer. It's like, this is ridiculous. And then getting into the content, the actual things in the videos, I mean, just talking about the more sordid sides, like, I feel like this sounds wild, but it's kind of a low-level hypnosis that takes place. It's this low-level hypnosis, especially, like, I think about kid videos, and this is not unique to TikTok, it's also on YouTube as well. The videos where it's just, like, really, really bright colors, and you look at the thumbnails and you say, there's something wrong with this. Like, children shouldn't be watching this. Or it's like slime being cut with a close microphone, ultra satisfying. And it's like, why is there a 7-year-old watching this? And the video will be like 12 minutes long.
Yeah.
Obviously not on TikTok, but
it makes me just like angry from the pit of my
because
stomach.
it feels wrong, right? Like there's something viscerally you react against it because it's like this isn't right.
Yeah, it's just gotten so much, like, so quickly. Like, when we were kids, we watched way too much TV.
Yeah, too much TV.
But now it's not even, like, it's just by the second becoming worse and worse and worse for the kids. And it just is barely
and so
sad.
targeted and nonsensical and just, like, I hate the term, but to scratch certain parts of the brain.
It literally does.
Yeah.
Like, they're just calculated. I've listened to podcasts about, like, those content houses before. And
What's that?
we'll talk about this next week.
Content houses?
What are content houses or content firms? But I wish I remembered exactly where I listened to this podcast. But anyway, I'll try and summarize it. It was this person explaining how they were part of a content house, in air quotes, where this guy who used to be not a scam artist, someone who did illusions, like he was a magician.
Yes.
So he hired a bunch of, like, influencers, and they would just do stuff like, the example they were giving, they're like, so you would, like, pour a liter of milk into the toilet and, like, add bubbles and then flush it.
Oh.
Just, like, disgusting stuff like that. But it wasn't even just, like, trying a bunch of stuff, like throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like, this guy who was the illusionist also studied human brains of, like,
I mean, it's obvious, though.
I know, but it's not obvious
To-
if
to
you're
children.
in it. Yeah, and you're a child. You're just like, oh my goodness, this is so fun to watch.
Yeah.
But it's just, not a fan. I think content house is an interesting topic because there's ones for kids, but there's ones for all ages. Like, infamously, David Dobrik and all his friends, when we were teens, they did that.
Well, I was going to say we could talk next week about the YouTube equivalent with, like, the Disney, remember Elsa Gate or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
There was something going on, but it even just feels too depressing to talk about.
Yeah, maybe we'll try and spin it.
Spin it
In
into
a
a positive
solacing way.
I don't even know how to. But this is, I mean, we're just talking about the kids stuff, but let alone when you talk about the older stuff and, like, the vapidity of the content, like, in the main, and just the overwhelming sexuality of it also, and even just the way people talk. Like, the way people talk when they're narrating those TikTok videos, or, like, a mini vlog, or when they're talking about, like, even, like, the deep ones when they're talking about politics, there's something so affected about it.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about.
I hate
You
it so
can hear
much.
it now just when I mention it.
Oh my goodness. I literally saw a...
Because, I mean, I know you know it, because, like, if you wanted to promote the podcast, you would have to speak like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way around it.
Yeah.
But I saw a literal congressman. It's like, sir, you sit in the highest seat of authority in the U.S. government. And he's just, like, shouting at the camera and smiling really big and being like, I'm going to take these guys down. And I'm like, you are an adult.
Well, maybe we could talk about, maybe a better way of spinning this is, like, well, not better, but, like, how the internet affects charisma, how it affects people's mannerisms when they're filming themselves and sharing it online, something like that.
I think that's an interesting question. I think also, like, sometimes it feels very complainy to, like, have these conversations, but also not everybody either has an awareness. I feel like a lot of people who listen to this has an awareness of these things, but it's also interesting to hear other people articulate it so that you can then go on to articulate it to other people. I've been listening to a podcast called Maintenance Phase, which you once sent me because you really liked the cover of it. It's an apple and a pear,
Sure.
and it's, like, blue and pink, and it looks really cool, but I never listened to it. But then I started listening to it. It's not, like, I'm not a health nut, but it's about debunking health claims, like debunking apple cider vinegar, debunking Dr. Oz, stuff like that. And it's just very...
Do they talk about G-bombs?
They haven't got to G-bombs.
Okay.
Well, I'm going back because they have, like, 60 episodes and I haven't listened to them all. But basically they always say, they're like, obviously you all know this. Like, you're not out here watching Dr. Oz, but having this podcast is, like, a reference for people who maybe are sold by everything that Dr. Oz sells or whatever it is. Like, this is a good place to refer people. And I try and remind myself of that on this podcast of like, I feel like people listening probably know this, but it is also like a reference.
I think people listen to things they agree with generally. So
Yeah.
people who listen to Solacene probably aren't like TikTok fiends.
Yeah.
They probably aren't offended when we talk about the negativity of like the slime videos for kids.
Yeah, they're like, I love those slime videos.
Yeah. I hope not anyway.
What we say is go make slime in your kitchen. I make Play-Doh sometimes. It's fun.
The final question of today is to create a Solacene meme. Kind of a fun one. I think we haven't done too much like designing of the Solacene so far in this semester because there's just so much to criticize. And even the questions we come up with for next week are quite negative. So over the week though, we'll spin it something more positive. So I was thinking like some tenets, like some things that came to mind for the Solacene meme is not from pop culture, so not referencing something that was mine anyway, not from an ad. Obviously beautiful, sustainable textile. And the thing that came to mind for me was two things. Goblin mode.
Goblin mode, okay.
Remember this?
Sort of.
This was going to be the meme of the week this week, but I changed it. Goblin mode was this idea about like, oh, I'm going in goblin mode, which basically means being ugly and pandemic-y with sweatpants and a hoodie and staying inside all day, watching, you know, Netflixing and eating Cheetos
Like
and stuff.
hermit mode.
Hermit mode, yeah. But it's called goblin mode.
Okay.
So I was thinking about some kind of inverse of that. So a meme, because that's a meme, but like a behavior which is more positive. And something else that you mentioned this week is apparently all the teenagers that you see running around and singing and making sound effects and jumping as if they are Mario in a platformer, which I have never seen either virtually or in real life, but it sounds funny. And I was like, this sounds like something children should be doing. It sounds like the kind of thing I was doing as a child. And the only change I would make for that to be more Solacene is perhaps not referencing a big international corporation. You know what I mean? Like, I love the playfulness of it and the activity of it, but the fact that it's still kind of all about consuming, because obviously the Mario movie came out and that's probably why it's in vogue. I don't know. That's the only slight negative. So I was trying to think of something along these lines, and the best I could come up with, which I know is like not very good, I was feeling weirdly uncreative about this, is what if there was a better response to how are you?
Okay.
Or how's it going? Because I think I don't know if that counts as a meme, like that's just communication. But that's such a common question, and again, it's not an insightful observation to point out that it's usually so vapid a response and so default to good, how are you? You know, like, how's it going? Oh, good, how are you? Like, it's always just the exact same thing, or else it's rude, or you also, like, I don't think it should be this big overshare about, well, actually, I'm not feeling so good. I don't actually think that honesty is good. Like, I'm not saying that it's bad that this is entirely ritual, but a Solacene meme-y kind of comedic, but also just beautiful, sustainable, tactile response, I thought, could be something along the lines of enjoying life and trying to make things better.
Yeah, like something a bit, I like that.
Just something so earnest and so positive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, loving life and trying to change the world. Just
Yeah.
like, and it is funny, but you're not laughing at them. Like, sometimes things can just be so kind of positive and earnest that they're funny, but not even in an ironic way. Like, sometimes I think, what's that animated movie, Trolls? Remember where it's like, every joke was like, one of them is really bubbly and sunshiny, and that was kind of the joke?
Yeah.
I'm not like laughing at it like that, but just like, so no one laughs, you just kind of do a smile. Because if someone said that to you, you would smile, right?
Yeah, I like this idea of kind of saying good, then expanding, but because you don't have to overshare. You don't have to be like, I'm fine, my mom is in the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do that, because it's like, that's not really what this interaction's for. You can be like, good, saw a flower on the way here.
Exactly, that kind of thing.
Good, just passed a dog. Like, I like this, sprinkling in just like a fun fact. And it would kind of be like when you have a mindfulness or like a thankfulness journal, but like it's kind of a...
Yeah, I was thinking also earlier in the episode, I was going to mention those books. What are those books called? You know, those books that you just write down, and people used to have them, but now they don't.
Like black books? What are they called?
But there's a name for it that it's a strange word. Anyway, this is also boring for the listeners. So. Yeah, that's my meme of the week. Not the best.
Okay, my meme
Oh, my
was... my Solacene meme was inspired by... I went to the museum, yes... Why are my days blurring? My meme was inspired by going to the museum 2 days ago and seeing people drawing, like sitting and drawing based on the artworks.
Mm-hmm.
And I said the Solacene meme would be, it could be digital, but it's like input, output, and it's you take a picture of something that's inspired you and then the output is what you've created. And I think, I was like, it has room to be funny because sometimes it's slightly self-deprecating of like, this is what inspired me and this is like the kind of garbage drawing that I did.
Yes.
So it's like slightly funny, but it's also just like inspiring people to create. And I feel like all creation, no matter if it's something beautiful or something just kind of like thrown together, it's still at least an act, something physical.
Mm-hmm.
And it would also inspire people to look around and be like, well, what's the input? Because sometimes we just like sit down to create art without thinking about what we're trying to channel. And that's fine because you've like internalized everything around you and like you can just channel that
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a really conscious inspiration.
But I think it's an interesting meme format in that it would be like, yeah, you're sitting in the park, you just like take a picture of the park in front of you.
Yes.
And then even like what the output could be could just be like you meditating, or the output could be you having a nice time with your friends. Like, I think it doesn't need to be necessarily always captured in pictures, but it could even just be like a mental meme of like...
I like it. It's a funny exercise.
Yeah, I like it.
I think everybody likes caricatures.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody always finds those funny. That's one of our goals, I suppose, as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
One of our like bucket list things is to be drawn.
Yeah.
But I think we both agree that we need to take a few more years to feel more confident. Otherwise, it could like shatter you.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
like, oh man, you pointed out my nose.
Yeah.
Or my teeth or something like that. But even so, we have done like somewhat funny portraits of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, obviously, we don't think we're as ugly as the drawing looks.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the contrast. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't blame you for like drawing me poorly because you're not a portrait artist.
Yeah. Or doing it with the left hand, I think we used to do. Something like that.
It's an interesting activity. And yeah, I just also felt very inspired by seeing all these, they weren't kids, they were like teenagers, but sitting in the museum drawing. I was like, this is, because I doubt they're all art students, they're probably just like in their art class, whatever
Yes.
they were brought there. But it's just like nice to see people creating stuff, because I feel like in your day-to-day in school, like you're not creating for the most part, and especially so now whatever you're creating would be digital, like typing a essay or doing a quiz online. Whereas it used to be like you'd write your essay or you'd write your quiz and you'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to frame this, but at least it's something.
But sometimes you did feel proud of it, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes in class you did feel proud of, and I think it's because, like this sounds ridiculous, I think it's because of the pain.
Yeah.
Like if anyone's ever had to write 2 essays in 45 minutes, as my like high school, my AP English class was, it was like genuinely a physical experience, and that makes me sound very like
no, like your fingers would
out-of-shape.
bleed.
My fingers wouldn't bleed,
My
but my
fingers
wrists
would
would hurt a
always
lot.
bleed.
And I think this might be one because I squeeze the pencil, like my life depends on it, and it's still a trait that I have. And 2, because I would I would press so hard. But I was trying to make my mark, and you know what? My writing, it will make its mark. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Thanks for listening, everybody.